Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seat. We're starting. It's my extreme pleasure to welcome you in this renovated room. After many years of renovations, it looks still as a museum, the good old style of the Palais des Nations in its early beginnings. And I hope you will enjoy this room if you have not been here. I talked to some people and they said they are here for the first time. So we come together here to celebrate the outcomes of a long-standing cooperation between the two intergovernmental bodies that are dealing with PRTRs, namely the OECD Working Party on PRTRs with the chair, and also the ECE working group of the parties to the protocol on PRTRs. Now, as you might know, it's for the fourth time that delegations meet for such a global event with the common objective to prevent and reduce pollution and the associated risks to human health and environment. Pollution and waste, climate change and biodiversity, you know, are the elements of the triple planetary crisis we are faced to today. And this is really one of the major self-inflicted disasters humans had to deal with and still will need to deal with in the future. We know these challenges for a long time already, but we still need to take action to come over them and the associated dangers. Pollution puts our lives at risk, be it at the global scale, in our regional neighborhoods, but also at the local levels. PRTRs teach us about the sources of pollution. They enable the facts-based decision-making and tracking of policy effectiveness, and doing so, PRTRs are furthering many efforts to solve the pollution crisis, hopefully before it's too late. They are also important for polluters to become more aware about their actual pollutant releases and to identify better ways to produce their products or move them from point A to point B. UNECE is in a privileged position to service the protocol on PRTRs, which is a remarkable global treaty with yet mainly European countries as parties. I'm hopeful that this will change soon, as more countries from outside of our region see the value of solid common standards and principles that the protocol offers. PRTRs, as you know, do not cover only one specific aspect of pollution of air or water or soil. Neither do they cover a specific group of pollutants alone. They aim to provide governments, the public, and other stakeholders with a comprehensive overview of all significant sources of pollution. Based on common standards, they can be applied around the globe and across different processes. Such cross-cutting nature of PRTRs makes the protocol a rather unique treaty which is capable to manage pollution in an effective and efficient way. Countries that have in place effective PRTRs, as required by the protocol, also support their human rights-related obligations on access to information. Furthermore, PRTRs being integrated with other information systems help to address the triple planetary crisis that I just mentioned and to transform economies towards a sustainable and circular path. This International PRTR Week is embedded between major global events that are dealing with biodiversity, COP6 of CBD in Cali, the climate COP that took place in Baku, and also the fifth negotiation round to develop a new multilateral environmental agreement on plastic pollution that will start on 25th this month in Busan, Korea. These events are surely relevant for PRTRs, which have a potential to support obligations under these processes. And PRTRs are also relevant for these processes too. A number of other MEAs and programs that are serviced by ECE are also closely interlinked to PRTRs. These include, for example, Air, Water and Industrial Accidents Convention and the Program on Environmental Monitoring and Assessment, and of course the Aarhus Convention, which details important obligations related to public access to environmental information, participation in decision-making, and access to justice related to pollution matters. Also, UNECE programs dealing with resource management, energy, transport, trade, health, and statistics can also benefit from the PRTRs, but the awareness of PRTRs within other sectors outside ECE still remains quite low. This is why raising awareness and applying a cohesive and integrated approach to pollution is truly essential. In this regard, sharing of knowledge and experience between countries and organizations is the key to the success of such efforts. I am glad that our gathering today will service specifically this purpose. Let me now come slowly to an end of my intervention by noting that in September this year, UN member states agreed on a new Pact for the Future with a global digital compact and declaration on future generations. These forward-looking documents provide us with a guidance on future actions, including on such important topics as transforming global governments and science, technology and innovation, and digital cooperation. The Aarhus Convention and the PRTR Protocol, along with other UNECE programs and activities of partner organizations, will play an important role in furthering these commitments. In this regard, let me warmly thank the OECD, UNITAR and UNEP for their fruitful, long-standing cooperation on the critical topic of chemicals management, and also for co-organizing today's event, which is a proof of true synergy among those organizations. UNECE is honored to open its doors to governments, NGOs, industry, intergovernmental organizations, and academic institutions from different continents that gathered here to share such visionary experiences. Finally, the success will not be possible without a strong leadership. Let me therefore express my deep appreciation to the governments of the United States of America, Slovenia, and Spain for their effective and continuous commitment to promote the work on PRTRs that has far-reaching global impact. I wish you every success. Now, it is my pleasure to invite my colleague from our valuable partner organization, Director Bob Diederich from OECD. He unfortunately was not able to join us today in person, but he provided us a pre-recorded video statement. I will now ask the Secretariat to screen it. Thank you for your attention.
Dear colleagues, it is my pleasure to provide some introductory remarks at FORCE Global Roundtable on PRTRs. First of all, I would like to thank Ms. Ela Beliarova and her team from the UNECE for co-organizing this FORCE Global Roundtable on PRTRs, and also thank UNITAR and UNEP for their cooperation in the organization of this event. Since the OECD started its program on PRTRs, the number of countries with operating PRTR systems has dramatically increased. This is due to the multilateral environment frameworks such as the Protocol on PRTRs, the ESCASU Agreement, or the OECD legal instrument, which are really the driving force behind the establishment of PRTR systems around the world. PRTRs are a fabulous tool. While they originally were meant to have a function as a public right-to-know tool, the uses of the data of PRTRs are still increasing. I still remember as a young risk assessor of individual chemicals for the environment in Germany and France, using PRTR data to validate my estimations of environmental concentrations of individual chemicals. And not so long ago, I came across an article in the New York Times, which was overlaying a map with companies that report to the PRTR in the United States, the TRI, overlaid with a map of regions or sites that are prone to flooding, which is, of course, an incredibly useful tool in the fight of climate change adaptation. And more recently, now we are proposing to use PRTR data to measure progress with implementing the new global framework on chemicals, which we just adopted last year. This is just to say that PRTRs continue to be an essential tool for many purposes, and which is why your collaboration is so important. We not only want to make sure that all countries around the world have a functioning PRTR system, we also want to make sure that those PRTR systems and their data play a role in managing new environmental challenges. This is, of course, a big task, and the Global Roundtable is at the forefront of addressing the challenge. With that, I would like to thank you again for allowing me to talk to you today, and I wish you a lot of success in your discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Keiner, and thank you to Mr. Diedrich in absentia. I'd now like to invite Mr. Tony Kvasic to give his statement.
Dear colleagues, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we meet today and tomorrow to share our experience and challenges and opportunities, and how PRTRs are an effective tool for a better environment, health, and circular economy. I am honored to chair the protocol, the only global treaty that sets legally binding standards on PRTRs. This helps countries to establish continuity in data collection and making data accessible. It also makes data interoperability across borders and sectors. As you know, PRTRs collect data from the source, including from industrial sites, and to make data from all significant sources of pollution available in a user-friendly way. The protocol on PRTRs provides countries with legally binding standards and this cross-cutting subject. Serving as a register that is multi-pollutant, multi-sectoral, and multi-environmental media, the protocol has strong links with other multilateral environmental agreements and other initiatives that cover specific parts of pollution-related issues. Furthermore, PRTRs can be used for multiple reporting obligations, for example, for Stockholm Convention, Minamata Convention, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and a new global framework on chemicals, and its PRTR target, namely target B3. In order to support continuity of national PRTRs and global harmonization, to facilitate international cooperation and use of PRTR data, it will be essential to establish the protocol on PRTRs as a globally recognized element of international institutional framework on pollution, including chemicals and waste issue. The protocol provided the foundations for involved decision-making by any stakeholder, polluter, consumers, or governments. It's important to note that the work under the protocol stimulated international cooperation on PRTRs which is an example of exceptional synergy. Different organizations played an important role for capacity building and advisory support on PRTRs. Each organization contributes different expertise. Related to technical matters, we have here UNITAR, UNEP, and OECD. For policy recommendation, we have OECD, UNEP, and ECE. And legal institutional frameworks, we have ECE. We have a few major recent developments, such as the 10th meeting of the working group of the parties to the protocol on PRTRs, which was held in Geneva, November 2023, considered measures to improve interoperability of PRTR system and to integrate them with other sources of data, and the role of PRTRs in promoting synergy among different international reporting obligations. The meeting allowed to further coordination and cooperation with other multilateral environmental agreements and processes dealing with pollution, chemicals, and waste, including the recently agreed Global Framework on Chemicals. The fourth Global Roundtable on Pollutant Release Register is aimed at strengthening capacities of countries to develop or improve their PRTR system. We will hear in the coming 2 days examples of how to modernize PRTRs, use of PRTR digital infrastructure for simplified reporting by polluters, user-friendly access to information, other databases to become interoperable and integrated with PRTR database and compatible with protocol standards, for PRTR data to be used to support global frameworks. I would now like, with plain words, say my personal view what PRTR is and what it could become. PRTR connect information about polluter with pollution into air, water, and ground, and add to this data about waste transfers. With connections to the international agreements like Stockholm Convention, Minamata Convention, Convention on Climate Change, or Global Framework on Chemicals, it can become a tool which enables public, academia, and experts in one place access to environmental data. Let me now conclude by wishing you all a successful meeting, and with that, I will invite Ms. Kathleen Briere for her statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 4th Global Roundtable on PRTRs. My name is Caitlin Briere, and I have the honor of serving as the chairperson of the OECD Working Party on PRTRs and the co-chair of this meeting. The OECD Working Party on PRTRs consists of policy and technical experts from OECD member countries and observer countries, as well as relevant organizations such as UNECE, UNEP, and UNITAR, and representatives from industry and NGOs. Its primary objective is to assist countries in establishing and implementing PRTR systems through developing resources and guidance documents on PRTR features and policies, facilitating data sharing between countries, and exchanging recent implementation challenges as well as best practices. The Working Party on PRTRs just concluded its 8th meeting earlier this week, though the history of this group dates back to 1996 with the OECD Council Act on PRTRs and the founding of the Task Force on PRTRs by the US and Canada. In subsequent years, the group grew quickly, as did global interest in PRTRs, with 15 member and partner countries by 2003, when the Council Act was updated the first time, and 42 member and partner countries when the Council Act on PRTR was revised in 2018. Over the years, the OECD's work on PRTRs has coalesced into 3 main areas. First, improving PRTRs. We support countries to improve PRTR data quality, for example, by updating guidance documents on release estimation techniques to quantify pollutants. Second, we support harmonizing PRTRs. As the number of national PRTR systems throughout the world grows, so too do the variations across those systems. The Working Party on PRTRs supports the harmonization of PRTR systems through updated harmonized lists of pollutants and sectors, as well as guidance documents on the elements of a PRTR to promote consistency across systems, which in turn supports our 3rd area of work, promoting and enhancing the use of PRTR data. As you know, PRTRs are a rich source of information at regional, national, and international levels, and harmonization enables robust comparison and analyses that can help inform global sustainability efforts. The OECD Working Party has multiple resources to help promote the use of PRTR, including a recently updated database of PRTR data uses and tools for their presentation, and an interactive visualization dashboard that presents combined pollutant release data from 7 PRTR systems comprising 39 countries. The Working Party had a very productive meeting in the first half of this week and was excited to welcome some first-time participants this year. We are looking forward to another year of work leading up to our next meeting in January of 2026. Turning now to the meeting at hand, I would like to briefly go through the agenda for the next 2 days and share some logistical information. We are very pleased to welcome approximately 100 attendees representing 50 countries and organizations to this week's meeting. While such great attendance is exciting, such a large meeting necessitates that we manage our time carefully this week, so the chairs will be doing our best to stick closely to the schedule. This morning's session will focus on PRTRs around the world and will be conducted in 2 parts with a 30-minute coffee break in between. In each part, all speakers will give their presentations, and then there will be time for questions and discussion. We will break for lunch promptly at 1 p.m. and reconvene at 3 p.m. for the afternoon session, which will focus on PRTRs for addressing global targets and challenges. The afternoon will follow a similar structure with time for questions and discussion after each group of presentations and a 30-minute coffee break in the middle of the session. Today's session will conclude at 6 p.m. Tomorrow morning, we will begin at 10 a.m. for the first session, which will focus on PRTR use cases and emerging systems, and go until the lunch break at 1 p.m. with a coffee break in the middle. After lunch, we will have the final presentation session on PRTRs for different stakeholders beginning at 3 p.m. There will be a short break, and then the meeting will conclude with closing statements by the chairs before we adjourn the meeting at 6 p.m. I would ask that all presenters please bring their nameplates up to the podium with them when they come give their presentation and bring them back to the meeting tables when finished. Thank you. So thank you to Mr. Keiner and Mr. Dieter for our opening statements. And I think we can move to the first item. So moving to our first presentation session, PRTRs across the world. This session aims to provide information about the current status of PRTRs in the world, including major challenges faced in the implementation or development of PRTRs and activities to address those by international organizations. I would like to invite our first group of speakers up to the podium, Mr. Inigo de Vicente Mingaro, Mr. Jorge Ocana, and Mr. Ludovic Bernodat. Sorry, and Mr. Hossein Fadey and Mr. Carlos de Miguel. Sorry. Are they here? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to, I think it's okay? It's okay? Okay. Okay, thank you. Good morning to everyone. And once again, thank you for giving me the chance to share with you the experiences about PRTRs in this group. I will focus my presentation on the importance of promoting PRTRs globally. Next slide. As you probably be aware about the mission of the International PRTR Coordinating Group, this is an open and informal group which main aim is to enhance coordination and cooperation at the global level among international organizations, governments, NGOs, and other interested parties in their ongoing and planned effort related to the further development and implementation on PRTR system. The main issue is just to try to facilitate the exchange of information on promoting PRTR activities that is one of the main aims without any political decisions to be taken in this group. So it's really nice just to focus on the just sharing and exchange of information of different experiences around the world. Currently, this group is served by UNITAR Canada and Spain on the Bureau, and also the UNECE Aarhus Convention and Protocol on PRTR Secretariat serves as the secretary of this group. And usually the meeting of ICG take place yearly, back-to-back with the OECD meetings. Next slide, please. This map tries to show you the, let's say, the PRTR world. I think it's already updated, but I'm not sure on that. I know that this year, in 2024, there are some movements around the world in terms of different PRTR activities, but the aim of the map is just to show the extension, the PRTR world globally. As you see, more around 73 countries in different global framework are working on PRTRs, and also there are other different initiatives in different regions, in different continents, also in different levels of interest in development PRTR system. So the conclusion is that this world is getting more and more important over the years. Next slide. As you also know, PRTRs are online inventories on pollution from industrial sites and other sources. This is quite important because all these systems are collecting the information directly from the source. That is quite important. Not in all inventories and other tools of gathering information are directly from the source, so it's really important, this issue. It's also, over the years, PRTRs have emerged as an important digital tool in the field of chemical management, and enable the public to play a more effective role in participating in the decision-making process. Also increasing the transparency in the related or in terms of environmental information, and also all this information allows to work together other inventories, other environmental tools, and with different purposes, and just exchanging information, sharing information in terms, for instance, spatial planning or risk assessment or assessment of resource consumption and transition to a circular economy. Next one, please. And in this state, maybe I would like to launch a strong message about maybe the importance of having a very strong instrument, international instrument, such as the protocol on PRTRs, but supported by governments and from around the globe, not only the UNECE regions, because this could be very helpful in not only in the implementation of the register itself, but also just to try to, let's say, harmonize, but if not, just to coordinate all the information we could gather in using these instruments. So this is one of the things we think that could be nice if in the future we could have, I mean, we have already now, but we could have an international instrument really supported by governments around the globe. Next slide. The importance of promoting PRTRs globally, you have a lot of reasons for that, but here you can see 3 of them. The most important, I think, for me, that it's due to the cross-cutting nature of PRTR. Its information helps, for instance, to see a number of different CDGs. Also, with other related processes, like the global framework of chemical, or also other existing and future multilateral environmental agreement, not only at global, but also national and regional level. Next one. How can the ICG contribute to these activities? Mainly, participants of the group agree, I insist, in a very informal way on important commitments to coordination on PRTR activities and exploring innovative ways to collect, manage, handle, and disseminate PRTR data. All these outcomes usually support the progress as I said before, in different environmental frameworks. ICG makes also it's significantly easier for countries and organizations to overcome hurdles and understanding to full potential of the digital transformation with regard to data on pollution and other digital platforms. And one of the most, I don't know important, but really interesting things that ICG makes is identify common challenges, what we call hot topics in PRTRs, regarding different aspects, depending on the also experiences shared in the group. So my last message will be just to invite all of you to participate in this group, just sharing your experiences in different levels, trying to put together our work and just trying to be better for future in PRTR world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'd like to invite our next speaker to present.
Thank you very much. I don't know if the presentation is up there. Great, thank you. Jorge Ocaña from UNITAR. I think some of the topics I was going to cover, they were covered by my colleague Inigo. So then I will go very briefly on the definition of what a PRTR, for example. Okay, here's the contents, essentially, briefly on what is PRTRs, PRTRs at the global level, and PRTRs program, the UNITAR program on PRTRs. And actually, in that particular chapter, in the third part, we'll discuss a little bit of what the linkages are with the different conventions. At the same time, also, we'll discuss what potential financial opportunities we may have. Thank you. Okay, what is a PRTR? I'm just going to describe the graph. Essentially, is some data generated by or reported by different industries or facilities, and then these facilities report the data to a central database. The central database, which normally is a ministry, national ministry in the governments, they process the data, and then the data is available for different purposes and different sectors and the general public. The data is multimedia. Next one, please. Data on air emissions, water, land, and off-site. The sources of pollutions could be somehow like diffuse sources of pollution, and actually you can also have the fixed or the point sources of pollution, which is coming from industries. Next one, please. Very briefly, PRTR applications, I think was already mentioned by Inigo. It's a tool for global environmental issues as well. So once you have the information from different countries and regions, you can see what are the issues at the global or regional level. It's also helping with national reporting. More and more PRTRs are being used to support the different reporting and the different conventions. For example, Minamata Convention could assist also for POPs Convention, etc. There is also the information dissemination component. So essentially, PRTRs also is a great tool to disseminate information for everyone, as the databases are accessible by the general public, by anyone. Next one, please. Okay, here's a brief overview of the PRTRs at the global level. Here's the linkages with the different conventions, different initiatives. Actually, the PRTR essentially has the strong basis on the Rio Declaration of Principle 10, and of course, in Aarhus Convention as well. And then you have also the Kiev Protocol, which essentially is, of course, is exclusively on PRTRs. The next one, please. On the Stockholm Convention on POPs, you see that Article 10 explicitly mentions PRTRs. It mentions on the collection and dissemination of releases, is clearly mentioned there. And then on Article 18 on the Minamata Convention on Mercury, is clearly mentioned as well. And there is also the United Nations Framework on Climate Change, makes somehow a reference to PRTR, essentially to provide GHG emissions data as well. Next one, please. As Inigo mentioned, there are linkages to SDGs as well. Here you have a number of examples, SDG 6, SDG 3, 16, 17, etc. So I think PRTR somehow is as cross-cutting all these different SDGs. So then in that sense also you will be complying with the SDGs if you implement PRTRs. Next one, please. I will not gonna go through this one because I think Chris already did, or Chris' office. Next one, please. Yes, next one, please. The UNITAR activities, and then we will touch base a little bit on finances as well. Next one. Regarding our activities on PRTRs, we have a learning platform, and actually we are maintaining it, so anyone can access the learning platform. We also made some online presentations on PRTRs. Essentially, there were different audiences for that. I think in Kuwait, it was more for ministries. The ministry wanted to know what is a PRTR. Essentially, it was a basic information on PRTRs and applications of that. In Indonesia, was more in the civil society involvement of PRTRs and how they can access, or how PRTRs can empower communities. And then in Colombia, was more into how do we improve our system, because they already have a PRTR system that has been developed, but now they are trying to improve it, trying to make it more solid. And at the same time, also how this system can be in compliance with the OECD requirements as well. There was also one presentation in person on October 24. Actually, there was under the WHO UNITAR expert consultation. Essentially, the meeting was on climate change, essentially climate resilient, but somehow there was a space, and we found some synergies with that particular area. So then essentially there was some sort of world cafe, and then we discussed a bit the importance of PRTRs and how they can support the work on climate. Okay, we also facilitated some key events as well. So in general, we are also doing that in UNITAR on a regular basis. Next one, please. Here's an overview of the PRTR platform. On the platform, you have some information on some of the countries that have already developed a PRTR. There's also some materials resources, and then also a couple of videos as well on particular key topics of PRTRs. Here you are, there's international guidelines. Actually, these international guidelines were updated in 2020. There's also fact sheets, videos, IMC toolbox as well. I think OECD mentioned this morning that the PRTR may be one of the good big components of the GFC, and actually this is related also to the IMC toolbox. There's also a network of international experts and e-learning as well. So here's just a screenshot of the website. Thank you. Okay, some financial support for PRTRs. I think this is one of the key questions that everybody around in this room are asking. So how do we go about PRTRs? And then I would like to develop one in my country, but I need some resources. I don't have the answer to that, but I can give you some just tips on what happened in the past and what you can explore. Probably you can try also bilateral support and free trade agreements. Normally in free trade agreements, when your country negotiates a free trade agreement, there is an environmental component. And some countries, they manage to include PRTRs on that. So then that may be one way to do it. There is also existing financial mechanisms in place. And one of them is the Global Environmental Facility. And then, and actually in the Global Environmental Facility, in the past, we've always been looking so much into the chemicals and waste cluster. But if you see PRTRs goes across different topics, different focal areas of the GEF. And somehow, why not exploring, for example, the Global Biodiversity Framework? If you do an analysis, you may find that target 7, 8, and 14 could be entry points for a PRTR. There is also the Minamata and Stockholm Convention, of course. That's obviously one possible entry as well to get some funding for PRTRs. Stockholm as well. And why not the Climate Change Convention? So we're always talking about PRTRs contributing to climate change. Why not trying to get that focal area involved in PRTR development? I have been told I have 1 minute. I will have to speed up now. Global Framework of Chemicals Fund. This is a new fund that has just been released in the last weeks. The deadline of application is 31st of January 2025. That may be another option. The fund provides, the fund provided is up to $800,000, and actually could be also multi-country submissions as well. And bilateral donors, as I mentioned before. The next one, please. I think I'm going to try to. Yeah, the next one is thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to invite our next speaker to begin your presentation.
Thank you. I will present a bit the update on the global framework on chemicals, which we've heard about a few times already today, and especially the linkages to PRTR, because that's what we're here to talk about, and we've had a very interesting discussion on Monday already. So let's continue this. Next slide, please. By the way, I'm Ludovic Bernod. I'm the head of the Knowledge and Risk Unit in UNEP Chemicals and Health branch, but here I'm not represented that unit. I'm representing the Secretariat of the Global Framework on Chemicals, which is also hosted by our branch. So here you can see a few summary about what is the Global Framework on Chemicals. I will not read in details. We've heard that. You've seen it before. What I want to reiterate is that the key characteristic of the GFC is that it is non-binding, which might have issues posed by this characteristic, but the advantage of that, it's multi-stakeholder. That means private sector, civil society, international organizations are stakeholders as well as countries. So that's the strength of the framework. And then it's it's also multi-sectoral. Next slide, please. So it was adopted, as we all know now, at the end of September 2023, at the fifth session of the International Conference on Chemical Management. But of course, it doesn't come from nothing. It's built on years of implementation of SICHEM, the Strategic Approach to International Chemicals Management. Next slide, please. because it's characteristic of being multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder, collaboration is key. And it's key to achieve the objectives and the targets of the framework, the 5 objectives, then the 28 targets. These targets, as we will see in a few slides, are addressing all the stakeholders so that we can together move towards a future free of harm from chemicals and waste. Next slide, please. So here you can see the 5 objectives, which are, in a sense, addressing the different stakeholders of the framework, with objective A, which is more about legal frameworks, so countries putting in place the necessary mechanisms so that chemicals and waste are properly managed. B is more about the knowledge about chemicals and waste used in products, their hazard potentially for human health and the environment, and how we can replace them by other safer chemicals, as said in objective D. And then we talk on C about issues of concerns, prioritized and addressed, because if we do, we can't deal with all the issues as a whole, of course, or what we will be, the scope of the work is so big that we would be stuck, and therefore we need to prioritize a bit our actions, and this is also deriving from the issues of concern from the SICEM work. And then, of course, we need implementation of the framework with resource mobilization from all the stakeholders, member state, but also private sector, and implementation of all the stakeholders as well, including the civil society and international organizations. I have 2 slides here showing the different targets of the framework. I will not go in details. I will just highlight a bit of targets that are really aligned with the PRTR work. Target A, for example, where governments are implementing and enforcing legal framework to minimize adverse effects from chemicals and waste. Target A3 on information of chemicals throughout their life cycle for companies this time. So again, different type of stakeholders. There's a target A4 that's quite interesting on the to prevent illegal trade and traffic of chemicals and waste. I'm not sure it's directly affecting in line with the PRTR process, but this is something that's very important because when we do implement regulations, automatically there will be response mechanism that might include illegal trade that we need to address as well. Target B1 on comprehensive data and information on the properties of chemicals. Again, that's quite important, and especially with PRTR, we need information on the chemicals that are emitted, that's target B3, and released in order to be able to take action and in order to foresee what will happen later on in the environment. Target B6 also talks about the global harmonized system and labeling of chemicals that has to do with trade. Next slide, please. Target, yes, it's already there. We're on target D1 on companies to invest and achieve innovation towards advancing sustainable chemistry. And again, reporting on this is important. Being transparent about it is important. And then we have a few targets on, of course, finance support, and targets on highly hazardous pesticide, especially related to a resolution on this issue, where FAO and other organizations are working together to create an alliance. Again, on target E2 here, and that relates very much to this work here, it's the partnership and networks. Important to, when we do communicate about emissions and release, we do it together, and then it can be transparent, but actions can be taken jointly. Next slide, please, and I'm almost done. So one piece of advance from last year that might interest you is that the Global Framework on Chemicals Fund has launched its first call for proposal, and the projects are expected to be between 300 and 800,000, up to 3 years of implementation. And the first call was open on October 1st, and we expect all the submissions to be done by the end of January. So it's important that countries are aware of this opportunity, and especially in the context of maybe PRTR and the targets that are addressing, that are aligned with PRTR. We can work together, UNITAR, others in IOMC and UNEP can help countries develop these projects. Next slide. Again, IOMC is organizing at the moment a number of workshops on implementation program to plan the work ahead towards the 2030 and 2035 to make sure we reach the targets. So that's something that will happen early in next year, and we are jointly working again with UNITAR on that. Next slide and final slide. This is a roadmap. So the timelines for us is that immediately now is the call for proposal for the fund. The executive board will approve the project in March next year. In June, we will meet with all the stakeholders for an open-ended working group in Nairobi to discuss the advance on the implementation of the framework, including the development of implementation programs and the work that we are doing on targets and indicators together with OECD and UNECE as well, as I presented on Monday. There will be other rounds of applications, but the milestone really is the first international conference at the end of 2026 that will approve all this document for good. So thank you very much. I think that's the last slide. If you have questions, you can email the GFC Secretariat. You can also email me, and I can forward that information to them.
Much. I'd like to move to our excuse me, final in-person presentation.
Good morning, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hussein Fadai. I'm the head of the UN Environment Management Group. I do not know how many of you are familiar with it, but this is the largest group of UN entities, including multilateral environment agreements, UN economic commissions, that has been established by the UN General Assembly to coordinate environmental activities of the UN system. I'm very pleased to be here, as you have, of course, heard from some of our colleagues already, from Marco and colleagues from UNITAR and UNEP. We are very much proud to be able to convene the UN system around many environmental topics. And one of the activities that this group has undertaken since 2022 has been the creation and preparation of the so-called UN Common Approach on Pollution, which aims to bring the efforts, capacities of the UN system to support countries in mitigating and preventing pollution. This common approach is inspired by global agendas relating to pollution, be it the UNEP implementation plan or be in the existing intergovernmental international instrument or regional instruments, and also, of course, the recently adopted global chemicals framework. So the UN system has brought this commitment for itself to integrate elements and provisions relating to pollution prevention and mitigation in its work, to influence its policies, strategies, programs, and also activities on the ground on pollution. basically, currently we have 3 UN common approaches. One is on pollution, one is on biodiversity, and also we have an approach on human rights to a healthy environment, which underpins these 2 common approaches on biodiversity and pollution. We have also a strategy on UN sustainability, which focuses a lot on our own sort of walking of the talk and leadership of the UN system in being an organization which is green and at the same time sustainable when it comes to its own operations. So we produce annually a report on the footprint of the UN system itself when it comes to its own operations, which is also publicly available. Very much, again, focusing on the common approach on pollution, which is the focus of this meeting. This common approach tries to, if you bring this slide, the next slide, if you go to the slides relating to the common approach, would be great. I'm not following the slides. It's trying to focus on the gist of the presentation. Next slide, please. Yes, thanks a lot. So as you will see, these common approaches are not like temporary arrangements or agreements. They are results-based frameworks that aim to integrate pollution agenda, whether it is relating to water or land or air quality, into UN sort of programming and into UN policies, and enable the UN system not only to create the capacity on these, but also be responsible and accountable to elements and provisions relating to pollution. So it has a set of principles, impact areas, and also 11 medium-term objectives. And when we compare this to what PRTRs are doing, specifically Objective 1 and 2 of the Common Approach very much interact with the principles and objectives of the PRTRs, which are really about the right to a healthy environment when it comes to access to information about pollution and pollutants, and also when it is about sharing information, data, and knowledge on pollution. So we see these 2 components very much related to PRTRs and the common approach. What I would like to stay on this is basically what I would see as a possibility for perhaps future cooperation is to benefit from your vision, from your expertise in strengthening the elements relating to data and transparency when it comes to implementing this common approach across the UN system. Obviously, we have 2 major objectives with regards to the common approach. One is at the global level, making sure that all UN agencies, MEAs, and economic commissions have integrated these elements relating to pollution reduction and mitigation into their strategic plans. But we would also like to see that all of these agencies at the national level, when they cooperate with the countries and to support countries, for example, implementing their national development plans or SDGs, they make sure that the provisions relating to pollution are embedded into UN cooperation framework agreements, which are eventually helping countries to create the capacities relating to pollution in their national development plan. So these are the key criteria that we would like to see implemented during the implementation plan of this common approach, that it is up to 2030, which also coincides with the duration of the implementation of the SDGs. 1 minute. Basically, what we are doing currently is to raise awareness in the UN system on the common approach, to monitor and allow UN agencies to report back on what they are doing on pollution, and also organizing a series of webinars that shows the importance of integration of pollution reduction and mitigation of the UN agencies. So these are the two components of our work. As I said, we are working with the existing interagency frameworks such as IOMC and also all UN entities. We are working with the UN country offices, which hopefully will eventually help countries to embed. I again look forward very much to cooperating and working with you to strengthen the components relating to data, transparency, access to information, and knowledge sharing with the UN system so that we can strengthen our activities and learn from each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We now have a video presentation as our final portion of this session.
Good morning. Thank you. Distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you for the invitation to address you in the framework of the 4th Global Roundtable on PRTRs and the 11th meeting of the Working Group of the Parties of the Protocol on PRTRs. I'm very glad to be with you, although not in person. As you know, ECLAC is the Secretariat of the Regional Agreement on Access to Information, Public Participation and Access to Justice in Environmental Matters in Latin America and the Caribbean, known as the SCASU Agreement. The SCASU Agreement was adopted the 4th of March in 2018 and in force since the 22nd of April of 2021. We have already 3 COPs. And the SCASU Agreement is one of the latest treaties to incorporate PRTR provisions and the first in Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, we have 17 parties, which are growing. The latest in ratify was Colombia, just before the COP16 of the Convention of Biodiversity. I will not enter in the details of the agreement, explaining all the provisions, but we have provisions related to PRTR, which are included in the access to environmental information pillar, which are in Article 6 in particular. And the Article 6.4 states, each party shall take steps to establish a pollutant release and transfer register covering air, water, soil, and subsoil pollutants, as well as materials and waste in their jurisdiction. These registers should be established progressively and updated periodically. At ECLAC, we are very convinced that PRTRs provide substantial environmental benefits, as they are the only or one of the most important tools for the dissemination of environmental information for the governments and the public, but particularly from and for the private sector. Quality and reliable information is always needed to design effective environmental and economic policies. And indeed, PRTRs offers a comprehensive data set of pollutants that contributes to improving environmental policies and also helps to align the economic incentives for sustainable development. And by the way, obviously also to report to all the environmental multilateral agreements. In Latin America and the Caribbean, only 2 countries, unfortunately, in the region currently have fully fledged, regularly reporting PRTRs, Chile and Mexico. Probably representatives of both parties will be with you there. However, several other Latin American countries are in different stages of their implementation of PRTRs, and there has been a lot of initiatives in the last years to try to develop these PRTRs in some of them. Additionally, the parties of the SCASU Agreement are increasingly prioritizing the establishment of PRTRs in their national implementation plans. Those plans, although started on a voluntary basis, now are a responsibility of the parties, which was adopted in last COP3 held in April in Santiago, last April in Santiago of Chile. Indeed, in COP3, the parties of the SCASU Agreement adopted 6 decisions, as you may see in the slide, and decision 1, which was related to the national implementation plans, also requests the Secretariat to prepare a report for consideration at COP4, in which which will be held in 2026, on national good practice related to the establishment, functioning, and content of the pollutant release and transfer registers. In that regard, ECLAC will highly appreciate the engagement of all relevant parties to the Aarhus Convention and PRTR protocol, and the members of the PRTR Roundtable in sharing with us practice, experience, and knowledge to further the establishment of the registers in the region. ECLAC will support any kind of cooperation effort to allow Latin American and the Caribbean countries to develop their PRTRs and also other sources of environmental information. As you realize, we have an outstanding opportunity to expand PRTR community in Latin America and the Caribbean and demonstrate how useful are PRTRs to achieve sustainable development. We rely once again in your knowledge, experience, and support. I will keep waiting for your contact to concrete cooperation opportunities, and I will thank you again for inviting me to address you, and I wish you have a successful meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of our presenters in this session. I would like to just note that the slides from this meeting will be uploaded after the meeting to the website, so people will have access to them. We now have time for questions and discussion. Are there any interventions? Okay, I don't see any flags in the room. So I think we can move to our break between presentations. Please come back to this meeting room by 11:55 for our next session of presentations. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone, and thank you for returning on time. We have just over an hour before we'll break for lunch at 1 o'clock, so we have another set of presentations that we will cover with more time for discussion after the presentations. So hopefully all of our presenters have returned. I would like to invite our second group of speakers up to the podium. First, we will start with a pre-recorded statement from Mr. Marcos Orellana. Then we will have Mr. Errol Cavos, Mr. Andrea Carraro, Mr. Richard Gutierrez, and Mr. Orlando Cabrera. If you could please make your way to the podium. Do you want to start with the video?
Delegates, my name is Marcos Orellana. I am the United Special Delegates. My name is Marcos Orellana. I am the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. Last September, I had the opportunity to present to the UN Human Rights Council a thematic report on pollution information portals that addressed pollutant release and transfer registries in detail. Today, I wish to make 3 points. First of all, that PRTRs for the acronym directly linked to the effective enjoyment of human rights. This may be in connection with the right of access to information or the enabling of public participation as a right in decision making over environmental matters. And critically, it also connects with access to justice. But perhaps most important of all is that we are in a juncture where we need all tools on deck for the implementation of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And that is perhaps the key challenge that we're facing, the transformation of information provided by PRTRs into knowledge that is actionable, that can be used in the hands of communities and public authorities. This requires analysis of data. It also requires engagement with communities. It may even require the integration with other environmental information platforms. This is the first point. A second point is that PRTRs are relevant for all countries and not just a handful of industrialized countries. The origins of PRTRs date back to the Bhopal tragedy 40 years ago in Bhopal, India. As a result, communities began to mobilize in the United States, where the parent corporation of the controller of the facility in Bhopal was domiciled. As a result, the toxic release inventory influenced practices in many members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It comes as no surprise that the emphasis was on industrial sources. But other sources, such as from agriculture or textile, can be estimated, and there are methodologies to do so. That is in the highlight of the evidence based for decision making and prioritization. A concrete example is the Kiev Protocol on PRTRs, which is open to any UN member states. The protocol requires making information on all significant sources available to the public and in a user friendly way. There are thus flexibilities to tailor the PRTR system to national priorities, in other words, to domesticate PRTRs. It's also important to highlight the opportunities for regional cooperation, South South cooperation as well, for scaling up lessons learned. And that is why, among other things, the global framework on chemicals that was adopted in the fifth session of the International Conference on Chemicals Management in Bonn a couple years ago contains a target where stakeholders generate data on emissions and releases of chemicals and waste to the environment, making these data available and public accessible. This target is not just for some countries, it is relevant for all countries. And the last point I wish to make today is that PRTRs should have clear pollution prevention mandates, because otherwise PRTRs can provide a false sense of complacency. There can be also a potential confusion between ends and means. The end is not the production of data and its disclosure, but actually the pollution prevention policies that result and are enabled by that information on the basis of that data. So a clear mandate on pollution prevention is essential. It may include the gradual reduction. It may definitely need to address the involvement and engagement of communities, because the goal is to make a toxic-free environment a reality for all. So, in conclusion, I wish to again reiterate that PRTRs directly relate to human rights, that PRTRs are a relevant tool for all countries, and that PRTRs should have clear pollution prevention mandates. Thank you very much for your attention.
I'd like to invite our next presenter to begin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We are very happy to be invited to this event, to this meeting, to share our experience from the Mediterranean region. Next slide, please. Dear representative of the countries, just very brief introduction of the UNEP map. What is UNEP map and what we are trying to do? We are a multilateral environmental agreement under the UNEP, which we are doing the secretariat. We are holding the secretariat work of the Barcelona Convention, and the Barcelona Convention is a regional convention which tries to protect the Mediterranean from seaborne and land-based pollution sources. We have 21 countries, according to the convention, which are the countries which have the coast to the Mediterranean, plus European Union as a contracting party. Next slide, please. I'm going to briefly go on what we have done and how we are seeing these all processes related to the PRTRs, discussions that has been on the table of today and yesterday and maybe tomorrow. In 2020, the UNEP MAP Secretariat with the contracting parties prepared a report on land-based sources, looking to prepare an indicator-based report for policymakers together with European Environmental Agency under the EU-funded project. What we saw when we are looking at the data, and please also consider the Mediterranean countries, what we saw three sectors which are growing in the Mediterranean. One was of the aquaculture, one is related to desalination, among others. The contracting parties decided to include these sectors in their land-based sources protocol, which regulates the sector of activities under the Barcelona Convention. It's a land-based sources and activities protocol, which is integral part of the Barcelona Convention. Then the parties decided to further work on the issue, looking at some flagged problems which we face with the urban wastewater treatment plants in the region, where the data is not very much available. Next slide, please. So agriculture and aquaculture and desalination was three main sectors that we thought are growing and has an impact, more or less, and will have an impact in the near future with the growing of these sectors in the Mediterranean Sea. So to close this gap, of course, using the guidelines and methodologies for estimation of pollutants from UNECE, OECD, UNITAR, and other, we produced a couple of guidelines for estimation techniques for these sectors, stemming from the literature which is available, but also streamlining this literature more to the regional level to serve our contracting parties more fit to purpose. Next slide, please. Then we tested with two volunteering countries these guidelines, which seems to be working. Of course, these are very new guidelines. There are also gaps that we need to close and increase the capacity in the region, and that it's in our next steps. Next, please. So, aquaculture and agricultures, based on these 2020 reports, the contracting parties also, besides the urban wastewater treatment plant, regional plan, also agreed on legally binding measures on agriculture and aquaculture, which were recently approved in the last COP of the Barcelona Convention. Next, please. Also, as a continuation, the COP mandated the Secretariat, especially METPOL, the unit which is dealing with land-based and pollution and monitoring, to make the 5th data call of the national baseline budget, which is very similar, harmonized way of PRTRs, but it's a little bit more simplistic. Of course, we are doing it as a 5th cycle, which we do it every 5 years. So this biennium, we are by the agreement, by the time line, we are making the data call for NBB. NBB is reported by the countries which don't have a PRTR. For the countries which have PRTR or ePRTR, we are using the data of the PRTR, which is very, very convenient and very beneficial for us to prepare indicator-based assessments for policymakers. The other issue that the COP asked to follow up is the marine desalination sector in the Mediterranean. As I said, we saw a growing need for water in the Mediterranean, which is more or less closed, or the gap is trying to be closed with the desalination plants. Yet, we still have some issues with how to monitor the sector, or how to define the sector, or where the data we can reliable and sound data to make policy assessments for the decision makers. And in the coming future, we also see that marine renewable energy sector in the Mediterranean is expected to more or less to have its speed on growing. Next slide, please. So I already mentioned what is NBB. The NBB here serves for collecting data every 5 years. It's very similar to the PRTR processes, just for the countries who doesn't have PRTRs. And based on the collected data, we are preparing the national action plan, which are national action plans for every 10 years. And this year is the final year of the previous national action plans, where we are trying to also produce the national action plans until 2035, using the data coming from NBB/PRTR, ePRTRs, all the PRTRs. So we are heavily reliant on the data of PRTRs to make policy assessment, especially on the land-based sources. On the marine ambient environment, we already have our monitoring program, which is in line with the Marine Strategy Directive as well, that the countries are supported to run their own national monitoring programs within our program and report data to Barcelona Convention. So on this, we are already covering the sea, the monitoring of the sea, but for monitoring of the land, we are much more reliant on the PRTR data. Next slide, please. Just to mention a little bit about the development of the sector of activity under the LBS protocol, the desalination, it is not a new issue. It's not a new sector. The first guideline was produced in 2003. And on 16, in COP Tirana, Albania, there was the second guideline produced, legally binding guideline produced by the contracting parties, which were endorsed by the COP. As I said, in 21, the contracting parties decide to define it as a sector of activity under the LBS protocol, which is using exactly the same nomenclature for economic activities codes in the Annex 1. And in last year, we produced an additional guideline how to implement or how to look for more sustainable approach in the desalination sector. What we see is the sector is moving from towards more sustainability, including sustainability approaches are more prevalent in the last years. Social aspects are more prevalent in these, and environmental impact assessments are more prevalent, becoming more prevalent and prevalent if you are comparing this, the approach to the sector in 2003. Also, we know that the sector is very much technology dependent, so the technology directly dictates the emissions or what the quality of emissions released. So this is very important to bear in mind when we are considering the desalination sectors. Next slide, please. 1 minute, I am finishing. So on this sector, we had 3 meetings. The last one was 2 weeks ago in Cyprus, kindly hosted by the government of Cyprus between 7 and 8 November. And here I would like to bring the attention, the message as the conclusion and recommendation of the meeting coming from the sector is that we need to work and on the emission limit values. We need to also look how to define the statistical classification of economic activities, as well as maybe in the future when we have enough data, we can also work on the ELVs, the effluent limit values. Also, as I said, the sector is very much technology oriented. So maybe in the future, BAT and BEPS and also BREF should be considered. So this is a clear message that I would like to just air here with your permission. That is coming from the Mediterranean contracting parties. Thank you very much.
Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Carraro to give his presentation.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is André Carraro, Program Officer at the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. I work in particular in the Science and Technical Assistance branch under the Basel Convention. Some of you might know me, so it's always nice to see friends of the PRTR family. And thanks again for the Secretariat also for inviting us to this meeting. And next slide, please. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the BRS conventions. The Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions are multilateral environmental agreements which share the common objective of protecting human health and the environment from hazardous chemicals and waste. Particularly the Basel Convention is currently the most comprehensive global treaty that deals with hazardous waste materials through their life cycles, so from production to transport, and PRTRs also deal with transport of chemicals and waste. Rotterdam conventions focus mostly on hazardous chemicals, industrial chemicals, pesticides, and basically enabling countries to decide if they want to import or trade these chemicals. And then the Stockholm Convention that is focusing on persistent organic pollutant, POPs. These substances have been proved to be very harmful for human health and environment. So through the Stockholm Convention, parties can decide how to eliminate or restrict or reduce the use of these substances. Next slide, please. This is a map just to show you the geographical coverage of the 3 conventions. So we are on the way of reaching universal participation. So currently we have 186 parties under the Stockholm Convention. We have 191 parties under Basel and 166 parties under the Rotterdam Convention. Coming to linkages between PRTRs and the convention, we see some interesting alignments between the convention and the protocol as well, particularly starting with the Stockholm Convention. You can see here highlighted some of the main articles where clearly pollutant release and transfer registers are suggested for parties to consider when coming to the task of collecting and disseminating information on annual quantities of chemicals that are listed in the different annexes. When we speak about Annex A, we are speaking about chemicals listed for elimination. There could be some specific exemption that parties can decide to apply, but these are chemicals that should be eliminated by a certain date. Under Annex B, we have chemicals that are listed for restrictions and limited use, with very specific example. In this case, for example, like use of DDTs for malaria vector control in case of a serious outbreak. So some parties can request this type of exemptions. And then Annex C, which deals with unintentional production of POPs. This can come from anthropogenic sources, but also from combustions or chemical reactions. So parties should also take into account these unintentional releases. Next slide, please. Under Rotterdam Convention, the possible linkages here we see, for example, under Article 15, where parties should take measures, for example, to establish national registers and database, which includes safety information. So this is, again, mostly regarding industrial, chemical, and severely hazardous, for example, pesticides, and procedures, basically, on how parties should trade these chemicals. And yeah, here we see, for example, suggesting to have national registers to collect this type of information. Next slide, please. Then under Basel, also there's very interesting similarities between the protocol. So on your left side, there is Annex 3 of the PRTR protocol, which reflects basically similar or same structure of the disposal and recovery operation section under Annex 4 of the Basel Convention, which is on the right. So these the similarities are basically taking into account same type of operations, disposal operations, and resource recovery and recycling. So this is definitely an interesting similarities between the two instruments. Next slide, please. Then in terms of reporting, under Basel, we have Article 13. So parties should transmit information on an annual basis, and in specifically in terms of, for example, generation of hazardous waste and other waste, so tons per year, quantities of exported and imported hazardous and other waste for disposal or recovery operations. And yeah, instead under Stockholm, the reports should come every 4 years, and it's mandated under Article 15, so parties should report on the kilograms, for example, of POPs produced, imported, exported, any unintentional release, yeah, and total tons of here that has been disposed for industrial POPs, etc. So there is a clear mandate for a party to report. So this is done through the focal point. So each convention has a focal point from that is designated by the party, who's responsible basically of submitting the the national reports. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of how we can add POPs or chemicals, hazardous substances to the convention, we have in particular the what we call POPs Review Committee. This is a subsidiary body of the Stockholm Convention, which is formed by government-designated experts. We take into account, of course, geographical distribution from the 5 regions, and basically they take into account the submission from parties, and then they review the chemicals proposed, and they make recommendations to the COP. And next slide. So how this is done, basically, if you see Article 8 in the convention, a party can submit a proposal for listing a new chemical. Then the committee will apply screening criteria to see if it reflects specific criteria under Annex D. And then basically the party should develop a risk profile and a risk management evaluation. These are discussed through the intersessional period between the COPs, and then the committee can come with specific recommendations that then will have to be approved by the COP. And usually this is basically listing a POP for elimination, Annex A, restriction, Annex B, or if it's unintentional production under Annex C. Next slide. Here is just an overview of the POPs, how they are currently listed, but also these ones in particular. Now we are, approaching the negotiation for the plastic treaty, and also we have seen how many of these POPs that are currently listed under Stockholm are also plastic-related chemicals. And in particular, next slide, please. In the most recent meeting of the POPs Review Committee in Rome in October, the committee decided to recommend to the next COP listing new POPs. In particular, we have long-chain perfluorocarboxylic acid, PFCAs, chlorinated paraffins, and also chloropyrifos, with, of course, some specific exemption for elimination, so in Annex A. Another interesting results of the meeting in October was that the committee also decided to submit a report with a set of recommendations to the COP, with some option on how to identify persistent organic pollutant in stockpiles, in products, and articles. So this will be discussed at the next COP for approval. Next slide. And yeah, so it will be next year, the end of April, for 2 weeks, and then so the COP will make final decision about the recommendation from the committee. Last slide. Just to conclude, yeah, we just like to underline again the synergies between the PRTR protocol and the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention, and how these instruments can really help tackling pollution at its source and addressing hazardous chemicals and waste management in general. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite our next presenter, Mr. Gutierrez.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Richard Gutierrez from the Minamata Convention Secretariat. I'm Program Officer that deals with national reporting and effectiveness evaluation. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for inviting us and to be able to provide you with updates on the work we do at the Minamata Convention. Next slide, please. So my presentation today will cover three items. Just a quick introduction on the convention. Second, to help you understand the linkages. And then last part of my presentation will provide you with the updates and next steps the convention is taking to on emissions and releases and work related to PRTR. So the slide in front of you shows what you will see in front of you. It's a quick, very, very quick sort of touchstone on the convention. The convention was adopted in 2013. It took effect in 2017. So we're just turning 7. And we already have, happy to report, we have 151 parties to date. Next slide, please. Key objective of the convention, as you would note from the prior slide, is the protection of human health and the environment from the anthropogenic sources of mercury. And this slide in front of you establishes sort of the 3 main points I'd like to touch on my talk today. That in relation to PRTR, there's 3 things about the convention that sort of people should know. Parties have an obligation to establish and maintain inventories for mercury emissions to air and then releases to land and water. PRTR is mentioned as a mechanism for collecting and disseminating information. And then the 3rd point is key, that data from these inventories will be used, and it's going to be used in evaluating the effectiveness of the convention. So let me go through these 3 points more closely. Next slide, please. So parties are obligated to establish inventories. These can be found in Articles 8 and 9. And as you will note in the slide in front of you, I won't go into the details, but Article 8 requires parties to establish inventories no later than 5 years after the date of entry into force of the convention for that party. And it's going to be the same for releases as well. So these are sort of the key points for the obligation. Oh, sorry, for the releases, it's 3 years. Next slide, please. Apologies for that. So after the establishment of these obligations, the guidance for emissions and releases inventories have been released, and it specifically refers to PRTR as a tool for inventories. Now, where PRTR programs do not exist, the guidance provides and encourages parties to look at alternative approaches. And one alternative approach is to use the UNEP toolkit in the identification and quantification of mercury releases. The other point I just wanted to mention on this slide is that currently almost half of the parties of the Minamata Convention have existent pollutant and release and transfer registries or are in the process of developing new systems. Next slide, please. So this is the more interesting slide I wanted to present to you, and this shows a snapshot of the status of implementation of the inventories. On the top, you will see a pie chart. The areas covered in gold is a reflection of the number of parties that have said yes, that they have implemented or have an inventory. So this database is based on the first full reporting period of the Minamata Convention, which covers the period from 2017 to 2020. So we are now at the cusp of our second full reporting period, covering from 2021 to 2024. And we do expect submissions to be, the second reporting will be submitted by the end of next year. And hopefully, some of the blue and gray areas that you see on top of on the slides in front of you that relate to emissions and releases inventory will hopefully increase the size of the gold portion of the charts. But let me just go back to the slide. So you have on top the emissions inventory, 51% of parties that have reported during the period said they have these inventories. The releases inventory, it's a little bit lagging behind. 42% of the parties that reported during the period reflected that they have these inventories. So for the first full national report, we had a 95% reporting rate. So the sample size of the population of the respondents to these to the reports is quite substantial. And then to the right of the pie charts, or rather to your left, you will see the regional breakdowns of which countries and which regions have been able to implement the inventories. Those who are new parties, which are highlighted in blue, and in gray, those parties that have said they have not implemented the inventories at all within that reporting period. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, PRTR is a mechanism for public information. Some of my colleagues have already pointed this out earlier. Under Article 18 of the Convention on Public Information and Awareness and Education, PRTR is specifically mentioned. Next slide, please. Now, another key point, data on mercury emissions and releases is going to be used for effectiveness evaluation. The COP established an open-ended scientific group to develop scientific reports on mercury monitoring and emissions and releases. The OESG first met face-to-face in March 2023 and has been meeting online on a regular basis. The next face-to-face meeting will be happening on March 2025 next year in Minamata, Japan. So as I mentioned previously as well, PRTR is recognized as a good source of emission and releases information. And then there was a presentation on this as well that the OECD presented on PRTR together with the Minamata Convention at the International Conference of Mercury as a Global Pollutant at Cape Town in July 2024 of this year. Next slide, please. So the more exciting stuff. What comes next? Parties are to report on the convention and the status of their implementation of their inventories, as I mentioned, next year when they file their full report at the end of December 2025. Another item to take note as well, with Article 18, parties have the opportunity to report on the status of their PRTR systems. The OESG will continue to examine mercury and emissions releases data from PRTRs, and then there's future opportunities for engagement on the use of PRTR data for controlling mercury emission and releases under Article 8 and 9, and also under Article 12 on mercury wastes, and of course the use of PRTR system in understanding the diffuse sources of mercury emissions and releases from a major emitter of mercury, the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector, and its allied issue on contaminated sites. So with that, I end my presentation, and thank you very much for your attention.
So much. I'd now like to invite our final speaker, Mr. Cabrera.
And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Orlando Cabrera Rivera. I'm the head of the Environmental Quality Unit at the Commission for Environmental Cooperation. And if we can have a presentation, okay. Just very briefly, the North American Commission for Environmental Cooperation is an international organization. It's a governmental organization created by Canada, US, and Mexico for the implementation on the agreement on the environment between the three countries. We were established in 1994. Next slide, please. And today, I'm going to provide you with some updates on the collaborative work that we have been doing on PRTRs at the North American level. We started actually 26 years ago to work collaboratively on PRTRs. At the time, actually, Canada was starting their PRTR system. Mexico did not have one. So it was through this collaborative work, the three countries, that then made possible the establishment of the Mexican PRTR. And since then, we have been working together in improving the comparability and the quality and the access to the PRTR data across the region. It is important to note also that the context in which we're doing this. We have three countries with shared ecosystems, shared population centers, shared environments, shared watersheds. So we need data that are comparable and compatible to address environmental concerns at the regional level. And that's why it is important to work collaboratively on this issue. So in terms of the objective and the activities of the North American PRTR initiative, we're going to touch on all of them, improve access to North American PRTR data and information. One of the important aspects of the Commission is to include public participation in decision-making. So access to information is crucial to that. So we want to improve access to North American PRTR data. We do that by not only working with the PRTR programs of the region, but also integrating the information and providing it to the public and to the other programs through the Taking Stock online database. It's an integrated North American PRTR database with over 40,000 facilities We have data from 2006 to 2022. Also, the taking stock report we do every couple of years with a special analysis on issues that are relevant to PRTR. And these are actually the topics that are selected for the report are based on what our stakeholders feel is an important topic. Our last one was published in March of 2023 and focused on transfers to disposal across the region. In terms of promoting data comparability, we work again with the 3 countries to increase comparability of the PRTR data. We have an action plan that this is our 3rd revision of the action plan. We're working on it right now. Stakeholder engagement, that's another important aspect. Public participation in PRTR development, where we bring together industry, governments, general public to discuss issues of importance to them regarding PRTR, data reporting, data access, and the use of the information. And then all this is to use the information for decision-making about pollution prevention and reductions. So now I'm going to touch quickly on each of those activities. If we can go to the next one, please. Our Taking Stock Online, this is the North American Integrated PRTR database. Last week, we actually updated the database with the years, the latest years to 2022. That's the latest available data for all the 3 countries. And you can visit that at www.cec.org/takingstock. I encourage you to go and visit the information. And a few things about the system. We have made some improvements. Not only the data has been updated, we have the landing page provides information at the North American level, offering also some interactivity, context, not only data, but what are the reporting requirements? What do you have to take into account when you look at PRTR data? So that's contextual information to help the user interpret the data. We have also a data query tool that provides additional information regarding pollutant coverage, alternate facility IDs, parent companies, etc. You can use the query tool to access the information from the 3 countries, from 2 countries, from 1 country, multiple years, single years, and then you can export the information for using further analysis, either through Excel sheets, flat files, or mapping formats for GIS applications. We also have a cross-border transfers tool, something that we added. You can go there, let's say, go to the US, and you can see how much of the transfers in a particular year went across borders. Right now, we are working with the OECD on this analysis. And for example, the North American countries, most of the transfers occur not only nationally, but also across borders between Canada, US, and Mexico. But also there are transfers to 26 other countries outside of North America. So it is important to track that information. And also, you may not have information about the release, but it's going to a facility someplace else, and that facility could be in a community that is affected, and that community has a right to have access to that information. That's why cross-border transfers information is important as well. We are trying to, for 2025, apply the transfers tool to also national transfers, so people can track in an easy way where the transfers have gone within their own countries, not only across borders. And also for 2025, we will be adding a facility-level greenhouse gas data
to our PRTR system, now that the 3 countries have their own greenhouse gases reporting program. And if we can move to the next one. Okay. One of the activities that we have been conducting in the last couple of years have been the Industry Pollution Prevention Challenge. Basically, we're looking at how pollution prevention, or P2 as it's called, is being reported to the PRTR programs. We just did an analysis of the P2 information reported in the 3 countries, looking at what kind of the reporting categories, the reporting requirements, the accessibility of the pollution prevention information. There are many sectors or industries that are interested not only in reporting, they want to know what other sectors or what other or the counterparts in the other countries are doing with regards to pollution prevention, so they can apply it as well. So we're looking here at, okay, what is the usability of the P2 information that is being reported? Can it be improved so it is useful, not only for reporting, not data for the sake of data, but can it be used for replicating those efforts someplace else? That's the bottom line here. So we have this internal report that we discussed already with our PRTR programs in the 3 countries, and in 2025 we'll be engaging industry. Right now we're working with the automotive sector, and we want to validate the results and also exchange information to see how we can improve the reporting requirements of the P2 information. Next, please. In terms of comparability, as mentioned before, we had an action plan to improve the comparability of PRTRs across North America. We just did an analysis on see where we are right now in 2024 after 26 years of working together. Of course, PRTR programs evolve, so they change, but then, okay, where are we now? So we look at national criteria and processes for evaluating substances, the gaps in comparability that we have right now, the recent and proposed changes in reporting requirements that the 3 countries are doing, of course, following their national needs. So in 2025 now, we're going to develop a strategy for information sharing on the proposed changes to PRTRs. Right now in Mexico, for example, the PRTR rule will be is up for review, and both Canada and the US have done some recent changes to theirs. So it is a time to start exchanging information to see if some of those, that experience can be taken up by Mexico at this point in terms of, to support the changes to the PRTR regulations. Next, and just quickly, 2 more things. I mentioned this already. We're working with the OECD on looking at cross-border transfers from North America to the OECD member countries that have PRTRs. And our stakeholder engagement, we have the next consultative meeting of the North American PRTR initiative. We're planning it for late February in Mexico City. That's a public meeting. And the last one, well, thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentations. I'd like to open the floor if there are any questions or comments for discussion. European Commission?
I have comments to 2 presentations, one of Mr. Cabus on aquaculture and desalination. Very interesting point indeed. As regards aquaculture, it was interesting to note that you say that the sector is growing. This is also something that we observed in the European Commission. And given that when revising our PRTR, European PRTR, we decided to change the reporting thresholds from 1,000 tons per year, which is the Kiev Protocol level, to 500. And this was also due to the fact that with the 1,000 tons per year threshold, we only received information from less than 20 installations in the European Union. So really, as you say, we don't have really good data on aquaculture impact on environment, and we hope this will improve. Aquaculture is not a sector captured by the Industrial Emissions Directive, so we don't have set the best available techniques for the sector. We'll see what happens with the data that will be coming from the sector in the future. First data will come in 2028. This is one thing. Desalination, we spoke during the break about it, and I think the first, maybe not comprehensive, but the first attempt to evaluate the sector to see to what extent it contributes to sustainability is the taxonomy regulation. So this is the European legal framework that enables investors to judge whether certain activity is sustainable or not. So there are clear criteria, and desalination is one of the activities captured by the taxonomy regulation. I can send you the link, so you will see there what's in there. The second thing I wanted to comment on is the presentation by Mr. Gutierrez on mercury. I'm coming from the unit that is responsible for the mercury regulation in DG Environment in the European Commission. And what we observed, you said monitoring reduction in mercury emissions. This is indeed, of course, we do it. We use the PRTR data for that. But also what we observed that we are victims of success because with the Industrial Emissions Directive and with specific technique standards, the industry is really improving. So most probably we stopped capturing really a lot of emissions from mercury because of the reporting thresholds, which for mercury are on the same level since, well, 2006 in the European legislation. So this is also something we need to have in mind, that not all emissions are reported because the thresholds remained on the same level, but the techniques improved. But indeed, they are falling down. The European Environment Agency publishes the indicator linked to heavy metals, the mercury. It tells in what percent the reductions went down, but it doesn't put the information in the context. You don't see the production volume, you just see how emissions went down, and indeed from 2005 until now it's around 50% less. So these are the comments I wanted to make. Thank you very much.
Just to thank for the comments. We are in full agreement of your comments, and we see that there is still pending work to be done. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and if I may. Thank you very much for your comment, and it is actually very true, and this is also part of what the exciting part of the work we're undertaking on the effectiveness evaluation group. It is that, looking at the data, making sure, I like the word that you used, compatible and comparable as well. So it's still very much sort of, as you would say, the group is still figuring out how to approach it, but they are looking at all these indicators and thresholds. So I would say, and I know there's experts from the European Union and the Commission that's participating. So let's keep our eye on the ball and make sure we don't miss these types of very important details and nuances when we look at the data. So thank you very much for your comments.
The chair recognizes EEB for a question.
Thank you very much. So EB, NGO. First of all, I fully support the comment made by the European Commission colleague about the need to adapt the thresholds which are out of touch with the current situation in terms of mercury. I mean, on the air route, 10 kilogram, it's extreme. My question is addressed to Errol and Richard, actually, in this context. So for Errol, I hear very clearly a wish that you need emission limit values or permit conditions to be included in the PRTR. This is something we could do immediately to understand where are the efforts actually made to prevent the pollution to enter into the marine environment. And this is not just on the water level, but also I think through the air route, which brings me to the question to Richard about whether under the Minamata emission like inventory checks, you also look at the deposition levels of mercury, which in our view from our European coal campaign work is the main emission source is the stack, the air route, and how the deposition of mercury affects biota, drinking water status, and all this legacy pollution we have, and whether you can also help us to make the link of the source emitter with the recipient environment, which is always complex, but there's a possibility to do so, and how we can make the polluter pay. And I mentioned this point in particular in view of the EU, because there is the EU Water Framework Directive, which is being reviewed, and many member states are just pushing back the compliance deadline because they are in breach of the biota standard on mercury, for example, instead of dealing with the problem at the source, which is getting rid of coal combustion, for example. And this is my second question. Will it help to get also information of company ranking on the point source emitters, such as those who, in a controlled, accepted way by the authority, emit mercury, coal combustion, versus, of course, illegal gold mining? What can you do? I mean, enforcement action is a bit difficult, but can we also have information about what is the investment of those member states, countries, parties, to prevent the pollution at the source? How can we help them? And how can we, let's say, get the accountability of decision makers to deal with the problem at the source? Do you have some suggestions for this?
Thank you very much for the questions. Those are tough ones. So on the issue of what I can gather, there's the first question on deposition. So the effectiveness evaluation group has just started its work. And it's sort of premature to say whether it's going to be covered. So at this stage, they're looking at all the data points that and now they're going into more deeply in terms of how to process the data, and also more importantly, what gaps are they finding in the data that needs the attention of the convention. So the effectiveness evaluation group will be meeting actually this December, and then again in March. So hopefully we do expect the work will proceed, and more substantive discussions can be shared with stakeholders and parties as well. So at least I would say in terms of the issue of deposition, I think this has been mentioned. The question is how will this be prioritized in the amount of work that the effectiveness evaluation group is doing. Then the other question that I was able to capture was the issue of is there a way to track investments or at least financing of work on this issue from the parties? Under the Minamata Convention, in the national reports, there are specific questions related to financing mechanisms, as well as you can call it funding that's devoted to work in addressing emissions and releases, and also not just in emissions and releases, but in all aspects of the work of the convention. These questions are found in both 13 and 14 on the contributions and amount of money that countries are putting in towards the implementation of the convention. So these are publicly available documents. You can check this out. But one of the key limitations that I will immediately share with you when you review the reports is that the governments, when they do report, it's in lump sum. So it's hard to make sort of clear characterization. This amount of money is going to this sector and that sector. And then, of course, there is also the challenge of the availability of information that governments are providing. But as I mentioned, all of the reports are available online. You can visit our website at minamataconvention.org and then take a look at questions 13 and 14. And feel free to look at also, we have prepared a dashboard showing the analysis, at least preliminary analysis on the responses to these questions. So you have a snapshot immediately, how many countries have reported, if there's an amount reported. So you'll have a general sense of how parties are putting money into their obligations. I hope that's helpful. Thanks.
Very much for the questions. I would agree that these are tough questions for sure. Regarding the permits and licenses for the regulating authorities, at national level, there are already permitting and licensing done by the regulating authority and controlling auditing authority. What we need, actually, what was discussed in the Mediterranean level to have more regional harmonized ELVs, which we use the same approach as we use for wastewater treatment plants, for sludge treatment plants, aquaculture, etc., etc. So we need the emphasis was to work for a regional environmental limit values. It is not easy because we know the desalination is very much reliant on the need and on the area region that it is established, because the byproducts or the products coming from the desalination, if you want to use it in a circular way, which you can, it's a very much proven way to do it, very much also relies on the local economic market condition that these byproducts can be retrieved and sold in a profitable way, that also you add them to the circular approaches. Last thing maybe is to also consider a little bit about the environmental impact assessment, which we notice there is a tendency also, the sector is advanced, is in a good level, not only environmental sustainability, but also economic and social sustainabilities are more and more what we see from the current research, are more and more intended to be included in the environmental impact assessment studies. However, there is no at this level, there is no unified way to agreed unified way. So this was our lessons that we are seeing from the region. Thank you.
For that discussion. Oh, Secretariat.
Yes, I would have two quick questions. One for Errol from Barcelona Convention. There is also the UNEP Regional Seas program, which you are a part of. Do you know if other conventions or other regional seas have similar reporting, similar questions that are discussed in those areas? And if yes, do you exchange on these issues? And then the other quick comment to Orlando from CEC about your plans for 2025 to look into greenhouse gas emissions that are actually recorded but not under the PRTR systems. I think that's a very interesting point for us also under the protocol on PRTRs, because we see this quite often that there is reporting, there's data collection happening, but not necessarily under the same institution, the same system, etc. So that would be very interesting to follow up on this, and I'm very much looking forward to see the results of this work, and happy also to cooperate if there's any opportunity on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With the other regional convention that are using PRTR, as far as we are aware, it is not very much known fact, except Barcelona Convention is very old convention that is for a long time collaborating with UNEC and know where the data needs to be retrieved. One thing that could be an interest, what we see it's also not exactly in our mandate, but with the nutrient management action plans, with recent decisions on global level, that PRTR also can very much support the nutrient management cycles, which have been already agreed on, and there are already preparation of the National Action Plan. What we are seeing we have the experience with the National Action Plans, that the data coming from PRTR is very useful, that we can use for populating our indicators and coming out with an indicator-based report for decision makers. Thank you.
And I apologize for interrupting the conversation, but we are at our 1 o'clock lunch break, and we need to be respectful of the translator's time. So I would like to propose that we pick this discussion up after lunch, and we will be reconvening promptly at 3 o'clock or 1500 for the afternoon session. Thank you.